broadcast is now starting.
All right, here we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Michael Wells. I'm the Community Manager here at PixelMill, and it is my honor to have you here for this month's offering of Broaden Your Dev Skill Set with Inspired SharePoint Branding. Now, before we start, just a couple quick housekeeping things. We are recording this session, so if there's anything you miss along the way, you will be able to come back and view it at a later date. We'll try to get that up as soon as we can. Also, there is a questions tab that you should have access to. If you do have questions at any time throughout the webinar today, please throw your questions up in there. We will do our best to answer those as quickly as possible. If we don't get to those during the actual webinar time, there is a Q&A at the end, and we'll try to address all questions as best as we can. Having said that, I'll stop talking now and introduce you to our speaker today. He is a two-time Microsoft MVP and an avid lover of kittens. He is Eric Overfield. Take it away, Eric.
All right. Thank you, Michael. The little follow-up on the questions is that tomorrow or by Monday, we will have a recording of this. Just watch our blog, watch my blog, which we'll get to in a little bit, watch Twitter, etc., and we will be posting the video as well with the blog post as well as answers to the questions that are asked. So again, if we don't get to the questions, please do use that tab. We are going to use it. The other thing, at the bottom of your screen, last time we had some issues with the screen being cut off. This time, I believe we fixed that. You'll see a URL at the bottom. That URL is so that if you want to download this slide deck now, which I do highly recommend, primarily because at the end there's a bunch of links and references. We'll only have so much time to get to those links, and you'll just want to grab them from the slide deck and move on. All right. With that, let's go ahead and kind of get started. We got about an hour here. If you need to jump off at 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific, totally understand. We're going to stay on a few minutes longer for questions. Yeah. All right. So who am I? For those of you that I have unfortunately not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Eric Overfield, President, Co-founder of PixelMill. As Michael said, I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Office servers and services space. Written a couple books or co-authored a couple books on SharePoint. My real passion besides SharePoint is also being actively involved in the SharePoint community. You'll find me through a lot of conferences in the United States, SharePoint Saturdays on the West Coast, etc. Also, you can find me at ericoverfield.com. That's my blog. I do highly recommend you sign up to receive the notification of when I write blog posts. I try to write them a couple times a month at least. And I've been focusing a lot on the new UI aspects of SharePoint, which is related to what this webinar is all about, as well as the news that's coming out of Microsoft that I'm allowed to share. So do highly recommend that. Or follow me on Twitter at Eric Overfield. If you remember my name, that seems to be helpful to help people get in contact with me. Very quickly about PixelMill, for those of you who are new to PixelMill, we are a digital agency out of Northern California. We've been around for quite a while, working in the Microsoft front-end web development space, actively involved in SharePoint for quite a while. If you're looking to do some SharePoint work, we are more than happy to talk to you. Okay, that sales pitch is over. Let's go ahead and have some fun over the next 35, 45 odd minutes. What I wanted to do this afternoon or this morning was talk about the evolution of SharePoint branding and where we've been and really where we're going. We're going to look at the different options that are available to branding SharePoint, as well as the tooling available, because things have changed. It's been a lot of fun to see what's happening within the SharePoint branding space, and then also building branding is one thing, but also maintaining it, deploying it, and installing it is something else altogether. And I wanted to look at the installation, deployment, and maintainability methodologies available to us within the SharePoint branding space. We're going to go over kind of some overviews first, sort of where we've been, and then overviews of the different options available to us. SharePoint 2013, 2016, and SharePoint Online. So we are going to look at modern on-prem as well as in the cloud. We'll go over those options very kind of quickly. We're then going to look at each option individually, and then I'm going to have some demos in there, about 4 demos, so we can look at some stuff. In the first 3 demos, I'm going to be skipping the installation method I'm using, and we're going to look at that at the 4th demo. I'll swing back around, so when you see me doing some weird PowerShell stuff, don't worry. We're going to go ahead and get to that because I do think it's important. When I get into some of the details, I can't get into like the deepest details on, say, master pages and what those are, because that's a whole webinar in and of itself. I'm going to go over some more of the higher level options that are available, and then the references at the end gives you a lot of links if you want to learn a lot more. So With that, let's go ahead and start with sort of like an evolution of what we've had available to us within branding SharePoint and see how far we've come. All right, so for those of you, and I'm not really included in that, in the 2001, 2003 days, if we wanted to touch SharePoint, we could. There was always methodologies available to us to customize the front end of SharePoint. We started with front page and CSS with some really basic theming, and even then back in those CSS days, I mean, that was really when CSS was just sort of coming around, and then the theming was really basic. So in SharePoint 2007, about the time a lot of us really got involved, especially in the branding space, one of the big things we got was a new tool, SharePoint Designer, which allowed us to work with the front-end branding of SharePoint. In particular, we were also given the alternative style sheet access as well as access to master pages and page layouts. And famously, a bunch of us about 10 years ago just dug into the master page or ripped it all apart. Really didn't help on the maintainability of SharePoint, but the options were there. And so then in 2013 and beyond, we still have a lot of those same features that 2007 and 2010 had, namely SharePoint Designer, alternative CSS, master pages, page layouts, JavaScript. Those still exist even in SharePoint Online today, except for the modern UI, which we're going to have some fun sort of looking at that or talking about that here in the next hour. The other big change that happened in SharePoint 2013 that's still available to us is this addition of this design manager. When that first came out, I was skeptical for a few weeks, and then I kind of embraced it. I saw how that would help a lot of people. Since then, I definitely have stopped using it. It kind of causes more problems than it's worth, in my opinion. It was Microsoft's attempt to bring in outside people, outside developers that were not in SharePoint, into SharePoint branding, and it really didn't work because you needed to know SharePoint in order to actually try to customize the front end, and I think that Microsoft realized that. The common thread that we've seen over the last 15 years, though, is that the branding elements of SharePoint, all of the HTML that was generated by SharePoint that we could then maybe style, was all rendered. It was created on the server side. SharePoint was delivering the HTML structure that we would be able to then customize maybe through branding, etc. Even with our custom master pages, SharePoint generated all of that HTML and delivered it to the browser. At that point, we could then use manipulation to maybe tweak it, or maybe we would add some CSS to customize the look. And that thread is now changing, and that's involved now with all the SharePoint framework. The catch is that's not available yet, not really for branding. So there's not much we can do today at this moment. So if we need to customize our SharePoint sites now, we want to know what's available to us. Okay, so then if we look at an evolution of how we would deploy our branding and how we can maintain branding across our farm, across our patches and installations and upgrades, what we saw in the old original days, 2001, 2003, was basically you had to go onto the farm itself, go into the file structure, and change your files there. Yeah, that was definitely not friendly. It was not something that was sustainable. In 2007 and 2010, again, with SharePoint Designer, you could maintain your branding, so at least you didn't have to go into the farm itself. You could then install full trust solutions, and then in 2010, sandbox solutions. So using the feature framework to package up your branding into a WSP, and using Visual Studio, you could package it up and deploy it into the farm, into the site collection. And then in 2013, they added in the add-in model. Microsoft provided the add-in model that was more of a cloud-friendly methodology to install our branding. But most recently, and what you're going to see on my demos, is using what's called PnP PowerShell. We'll get into that. And it works really well, actually, and it is much more future-friendly, and it doesn't require really a developer to do that installation. For those of you who joined us on our webinar last month, you actually saw a lot of that PnP PowerShell and how that would be used to maintain SharePoint. We're going to use it here on how to deploy branding on top of our SharePoint sites. So if we want to look at what's currently available to us and how that might work across on-prem and in the cloud, well, the first thing that we really are going to have available to us is compose looks and themes. And this is available to us on-prem and in the cloud, basically kind of parity, at least for classic experiences in SharePoint Online. We still have alternative CSS custom actions like custom JavaScript injection, where we can take JavaScript and we can inject JavaScript directly into SharePoint without customizing the master page, as well as we can update master pages and page layouts. Now, why did I take those last 3 tabs and sort of move them to the left? Even though they are kind of cloud friendly, they're really more for on-prem. And the primary reason why is because of the modern UI. Currently, modern team sites do not allow for custom master pages and page layouts really at all. Well, they don't, period. And they don't even allow for custom JavaScript or custom CSS. They're only using the composed looks and themes. That doesn't mean that you can't use alternative CSS, JavaScript, master pages, etc. in SharePoint Online. It just means you cannot yet use the new modern experiences. So you can create classic team sites, you can create publishing sites in SharePoint Online for your portals, for your collaboration, and that does work as of now just fine. Microsoft is well aware that we still need that requirement to change the UI and the branding on some of our SharePoint experiences, and what they've committed to, at least what they've said, and I'm going to try to do my best to hold them to it for you and for everyone else that I work with, that they will not get rid of the classic experiences, publishing, team sites, etc., until they have feature parity with the modern UI, which really means, to me, the SharePoint Framework. So when the SharePoint Framework is fully baked and they're finding the metrics show that people really aren't using classic experiences, that's when they'll turn it off. Microsoft is providing no timeline on that, but when I look at it, and I have no insight, but when I look at it, to me that means years. That's not months, that's not quarters, that's years. It's going to take a while before we lose completely alternative CSS through custom master pages and classic experiences in SharePoint Online. If you're on-prem 2013, 2016, you really don't have to worry about it right now, because they're not going to turn that off unless you install some update, which isn't even really on the roadmap yet. For deployment, very similar ideas here. We've got SharePoint Designer, as well as you've got the sandbox solutions, as long as they're declarative. So this is available on-prem for sure. In the cloud, again, I kind of move it more towards the on-prem side, because with modern experiences, we don't get either of these. We really don't get SharePoint Designer, nor do we get anything like sandbox solutions. You still can use add-ins, though, in PnP PowerShell to deploy your branding in both on-prem and the cloud at basic feature parity. There's not too much of a difference, except to me add-ins in SharePoint 2013 are a little tricky, but that's a different point. If you're on-prem, you still can use legitimately fully supported in 2016 full trust solutions. These are solutions, again, created in Visual Studio that most likely a development team would create for you if you're not a developer. You would install these into the farm. When they get installed, they do take your farm down for a few minutes while the service applications are resetting themselves. And you still can provide sandbox solutions that have code in them. It's just those are not cloud friendly. So sandbox solutions with code have been deprecated in the cloud. In fact, they are no longer allowed. They've actually been shut off. But you still can have declarative solutions, meaning a sandbox solution which doesn't include any sort of DLL or any kind of compiled code. So I want to reiterate there, you cannot use full trust solutions in the cloud. So that's like a big, that will never change. And the sandbox solutions with code, Microsoft, I can't believe they're ever going to turn that on again. They have not said they will. It's not on the roadmap. I don't expect they will. I believe most people are going to move towards PnP and PowerShell for deploying SharePoint, and that's definitely what I'm doing. That's what my company's doing. That's what anyone I interact with, I'm telling them, you want to move to the PnP PowerShell model for deployment. So let's go through kind of in detail now. Let's kind of keep moving forward here. Now we sort of looked at these different ideas. What do they look like in practice, and how can we use them? If you're on Office 365, you've got Office 365 themes. This is a tenant-wide branding across 365. It's very basic, but it does allow you to brand basically the ribbon. That's kind of really what we're getting out of that. But it's supposed to help provide a common thread across your 365 experiences. The next step would be SharePoint theming. So this is basic theming without a custom master page, without custom CSS, etc. But it does allow you to customize colors and fonts, as well as provide a background image. So there's some some power there. And if you look at the screenshot I have, I mean, yeah, that screenshot in the lower right-hand corner does still look like SharePoint, but you can start to get some new look and feel to it that provides a little bit more of a non-SharePoint look. So 365 themes, these are set in your Office 365 admin tenant. So if you wanted to set it, you would have to be an admin to it. I have found it takes about a day or so for the custom theming to get applied to SharePoint. It might get applied elsewhere instantly, but I believe there's some caching going on. So if you set your theme, your 365 theme, and it doesn't show up in SharePoint, give it a day. A theme, each of your users in 365 can provide their own personal theme, so they can override your organizational theme with their personal theme, but you can turn that off as well in case you don't want people to set their own themes. My opinion is, for most organizations, is you would not allow personal theming. That sort of defeats the purpose of why we would allow theming. The 365 themes, they are global, but they're extremely limited. So the pros are they're really easy to set, takes 2 minutes, and it's really the best way if you want to customize the look and feel of your sweet bar and ribbon. If you're in 365, you really should not be using CSS to modify or JavaScript to modify the ribbon within SharePoint. That's just a big disaster waiting to happen because Microsoft is constantly making changes to that. Further, with the modern UIs, the modern lists and libraries, you don't really get that ribbon experience. So if your portals are dependent upon it, you're really setting yourself up for some failures. Major cons are that it's limited, and it is extremely limited, as well as it's only for 365. All right, so compose looks and theming. Well, you can create your own custom color palette pretty quickly, really, with no code. Microsoft has provided the color palette, this color palette creation tool. It's a free download for Microsoft, and best way to find it is Google SharePoint color palette tool. If you do that, you're going to find the one and only version 1.00. Why they did 00, considering they haven't updated, don't know. It's a great little tool, though, and it even provides like this preview window, which you can see, which helps you see what your theme might end up looking like when you actually go ahead and apply it. So this works across your 365, your SharePoint tenant. You can install it at different levels so that it's available at sites and webs, etc. It is future friendly even in SharePoint Online. So if you're using the modern UI, it's actually a pro and a con. The theming is used by the modern UI, but only at this point, at least what I've read as of yesterday, only 3 real buckets are used, and that's the color accent, one page background, and background overlay. And I have the bucket numbers listed, and I'm going to show you here in a demo shortly kind of where those buckets are and where you could set those. I have found it to be a little finicky when I attempted to install a theme to get it to work within the modern UI. It didn't quite work the way I always wanted it to, but that's what Microsoft says. And I do have a reference written by Vesa Jovanen, Microsoft engineer, who detailed out how to use a composed look and a theme to customize the color palette within a modern UI. So let's just jump right in then to a demo. I think this will be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and we'll pull up a standard SharePoint site here. Nothing really special going on here. It's just a SharePoint site. We don't need any of those. That is one of my live tenants, so it's going to be kind of fun there too. All right, so we want to go ahead and first look at if we wanted to apply a 365 theme. So what I've already done is I've gone into the admin center, I've gone to settings, I've gone to organizational profile, and then within that I'm going to click on edit here under the manage custom themes for your organization. As soon as I do that, oh, looks like I got logged out. As soon as I do that, once it loads up again, of course I'm going to have to go do that again. Organizational profile, edit. Okay, doesn't seem to like my login. Let me try one more time. If this doesn't work, we're going to move forward because it's really not that important. There we go. You can provide a logo, which you can see there's already a logo here on the top of the screen here. That would be the select custom logo here. If you want that logo to be clickable, you could actually say that when you click it, it might go to, say, an organizational portal that you might have. You can set a background image, and you can set a couple of colors, which you can see we've already done. So once you do that, you go to the bottom, you click Save. That's it. That's pretty simple, pretty easy. Let's move on and look at some theming, though. I think that's a little more entertaining. Okay, so I've already opened up the color palette tool here. So this is the color palette tool that Microsoft provides. If you look at the left, there's a whole bunch of buckets of colors. The ones that I wanted to highlight right now would be under bucket 10. These are the ones that we said that are available to the modern UI. So you could change these colors to match your needs. And if you scroll to the bottom under bucket 25, you'll also see color accent 1. So that's really it in the modern UI. If you're looking at classic experiences or on-prem, you actually have all these buckets. So you change any of these buckets, the preview window on the right will change. What you could then do is you can save. You'd be saving an SP color file. SP color file, it's basically an XML document, and you would upload that. Well, I want to figure out what else is going on here. I would like to kind of change some stuff here. Well, one of the things is I'm not overly good at color, so I thought, hey, maybe Microsoft might have given me a tool to help me get started, and it did. So let's say I have a background image or some sort of image that I know I want to pull the colors from. I can actually click on a color button, and there's this little eyedropper tag, and if I click it and hold on to it, you'll see that as I move my mouse, the colors change, and as they change, the color pickle tool is trying to figure out about what color it is that I've selected. And once I click OK, and I click on recolor, the theme will automatically recolor about based off of some algorithms that we don't fully have access to on what we just had there. Now let's say that I wanted to set the background image to sort of make that help out. All right, I can actually do that here. I can go ahead and click change, and I'm going to go to the folder in question, which is already there. Click open, and I can see what this theme is going to start to look like. Again, I would save that SP color file. Now I need to move that into SharePoint. All right, the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to be using PNP PowerShell, and I'll get into sort of the meats of what's going on at a little in the fourth demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set some tracing. I'm going to grab my credentials so that I can easily log in here. Okay, at this point, I created a PowerShell script that allows me to set the theming to basically upload the SP color file that I want to upload. It gives me a target URL. Where do I want to apply this to? The master page I want to set, because that's one of the things that ComposeLooks allow us to do. And then I'm going to send along my credentials. Okay, so while that's happening, let's go ahead and go look at the SP color file in question here. So I will go to my theming folder, and I will look at the SP color file. So this is the SP color file I created using the color palette tool, and you can see it's basically just XML. It's a simple XML document, but it provides all of the major components that we can recolor, and then we just can provide a RGB value. So you don't need to use a color palette tool. You could actually do all the work in the SP color file itself, and you can go from there. I should mention as well, all of the code we're going to go through is available on GitHub. If you go to github.com/Overfield, you'll find all of my repos that I have, and one of them is on branding. And you can grab all of the code here that you see that we're going to work through, so you can play with it yourself. All right, let's go back to PowerShell and let's see where we are. What we're getting here is a whole bunch of debugging information, and basically it says, hey, the compose look has been applied. We can even see that it set the master page. So let's go back. Let's click on refresh. There we go. Not too bad. It's quick and easy. It uploaded the background image. It set the background image. It uploaded the SP color file, and it even set the master page. So what I actually want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and undo this because my next demo I want to get back to the Seattle master. So this is another way that you can change your compose look is you can go and basically set the compose looks that are available out of the box. You can even add these as well if you want. So you can re-add, you can create your own compose looks that you dump directly in there. Into the Compose Look gallery, and you can set them via the browser. I just found that PNP PowerShell is a far more reliable way for administrators to maintain branding across their tenant. All right, so I'm going to keep this. Compose Looks have been around here for about 4 years, so there's quite a lot of documentation on them as well as some full hour demos on how to work through them and use them. Okay, so we're back to kind of where we were because I want to move forward with our presentation here. So the next kind of like higher level methodology if we wanted to customize our branding on SharePoint up through modern experiences. So again, modern experiences, modern UIs, modern team sites don't allow this, but all of our other SharePoint experiences and SharePoint on-prem experiences absolutely allow for these next methodologies, which is alternative CSS as well as JavaScript Embed. Both of these two techniques do not require a custom master page either, which is a really good thing. So alternative CSS, the idea here is that you're creating a CSS file, ideally really one because you only can link to one, and there is a setting within SharePoint that allows you to tell SharePoint, hey, there is an alternative CSS that exists, an alternate CSS URL that exists, and we want to have that CSS file included in any page that is loaded from our SharePoint site. There are a couple ways you can set it. If you have publishing enabled, and in 365 you can always turn publishing on even in classic team sites, but if you're on-prem, as long as you've got a standard license, you can allow for publishing. You can set the alternative CSS directly in the browser. You can also set the web property via CSOM or REST API, which is what we're going to do through PnP. So you can use PowerShell, you can build a console app, you can build an add-on that will set the alternative CSS URL for any experience that you have, even those without publishing enabled. What is nice about CSS, alternate CSS, is you can start to provide responsive abilities and make your sites more mobile friendly without even creating a custom master page. It may not be perfect, but it can at least get you a lot of the steps that are necessary for your classic experiences to load more cleanly on mobile devices. But I do want to point out that the new portal experiences, all of the new stuff Microsoft is creating, they're very well aware that we need this to load on mobile devices, and they are ensuring that their portal experiences are natively responsive. So the big pros here is that you can get some pretty sophisticated branding on top of SharePoint, much more than theming, again, without a custom master page, without any kind of custom JavaScript. You can control colors for sure, but you can now control more of the layout, whereas composed looks did not allow that. You could only color things. With CSS now, you could use some of the positioning allowed in CSS to manipulate the layout, the size of columns, and things like that. It's pretty simple to install and maintain one alternative CSS file or your alternate CSS, especially because you don't have a custom master page. If Microsoft makes changes, it's most likely not going to completely break your experiences. You can just update your CSS as needed. Major cons here are that, again, keep coming back to this, modern UI, no support. There's just not much we can do. And there are, of course, limits to what CSS can accomplish. There are times when the DOM, the document object model, the HTML that is provided by SharePoint is not what we want. And we're going to need something more to help us with that, which may come in, which may be where JavaScript embedding comes in. So the idea of JavaScript, and those of you who are JavaScript experts know, if you give me a hook into SharePoint where I can load almost like one line of JavaScript code, at least a couple, I can take control of the UI, right? Because then once you give me one little hook to create some JavaScript, I can now start loading all of my own JavaScript, and then I can completely manipulate the DOM. There's a fun little anecdote that came out the last couple weeks, and it was one of my more recent blog posts, which was a Michael Svensson out of Norway. He figured out a way to take the SharePoint framework and create a SharePoint framework web part to create a script editor web part. As soon as he did that, so now you've got this SharePoint framework web part that can load your own custom JavaScript that's outside of the framework. As soon as you do that, you can now completely take control of the modern experience on that specific page that web part's in. So you can kind of get around Microsoft. It's not supported in any way by Microsoft, but again, you give me the hook, I can change things. So using custom actions, which have been around for a while, you can inject JavaScript into your SharePoint experiences, not modern UI, where you can then do whatever it is you need to do, but again, without modifying the master page. So some of the pros here is at this point, now that you've got your JavaScript injected into SharePoint without having to customize the master, you can now take control of the DOM. You can manipulate it as needed. You can start to maneuver things without having to customize that little master page. And using something like PNP or add-in makes adding custom actions fairly simple, and it can definitely be a part of your deployment process. If you're going to do this, the big con here is, of course, you need some JavaScript pros, but probably a lot of you already have experience in JavaScript, or your development team does. Again, I keep coming back to it, no modern UI support. And you do need to be very careful when you manipulate the DOM, when you use JavaScript to start manipulating what SharePoint is delivering, especially on SharePoint Online. Expect things to break in the future. There are ways around that, not around it, but there are ways to help protect yourself. Ideally, that being that if you're on SharePoint Online and on-prem, you should have already been doing this. You would have your live tenant, a tenant that is not set to first release on SharePoint Online, and on-prem, it's your tenant that you don't install patches till you've tested everything. What you can then do on SharePoint Online is you create another tenant that is on first release, which allows you to get updates quicker than everybody else. In particular, quicker than your production tenant in 365. You put all your manipulations there, your JavaScript, your branding over there, and you watch to see what breaks. And you check it every 2 to 4 weeks. And if something breaks, you fix it. You then deploy it into your production environment so that when your production environment in 365 sees the updates, you now have something to do. How this idea works, this remote deployment works of your of PNP and in particular JavaScript injection, is you have your remote deployment in your SharePoint service. What would happen is we're using something. We're going to use CSOM REST, etc., to deploy our JavaScript into SharePoint. So we need to add the file or files. Then using JavaScript embed as a custom action, we're able to tell the SharePoint service that when SharePoint is loaded, when someone requests a page, that JavaScript, that linked or that reference to that JavaScript file is included in the returned HTML, even though we have not updated the master page. The alternative CSS is very similar, but it has a specific field that is there, that alternate CSS URL field. With JavaScript, we're actually having to inject a custom action, which can do all kinds of things. We're just using it to create this reference to a JavaScript file. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our second demo, which would be alternative CSS and JavaScript embedding. Okay, whoops. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our demo site here. We want to go ahead and change this with something a little more powerful. So let me go ahead and load up the files here that we're going to be uploading. In particular, we're going to upload a bunch of some imagery. We're also going to load a CSS file. So there's this custom level CSS, and really there's a lot of lines of simple CSS. Not really much I can tell you about it. There's just too many lines to go over right now. And then we're going to load up some JavaScript as well. What we're going to do at the end, if we scroll all the way to the bottom, is we are using jQuery, and I know a lot of you say, wow, jQuery, it's old. Yeah, I know, Vanilla.js, but this is just easier for demo. Basically, we have two functions that we're going to set up, which is this mobile UI and this wiki layout. So we're going to do some DOM manipulation to help us create kind of a cool experience. But again, no custom master page. So I think we'll see, we'll have a lot of fun on what we can do with that. I'm going to get back to this PS1 file. This is the PowerShell script that we're going to run. This will be our fourth demo where we'll look at see how I'm using PNP to deploy all this stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and set this up. I've already done most of this. I'm going to switch to another folder. Okay, at this point, I'm going to set some branding. So I'm going to run that PowerShell script. Same thing, I'm going to deploy it to the same site that we've been looking at, and I'm sending my credentials. The serve local, we can ignore that for now. That's not overly important at this time. So this is going to deploy. It's going to take a few minutes. Again, I have debugging loaded, so if you typically wouldn't run that, you wouldn't be seeing all this extra stuff that's happening. I like it. It kind of shows you what's happening. It tells you all the files that are being loaded. I have found that with PNP provisioning and the PNP PowerShell, when it fails, if you don't have debugging enabled, it just fails, and it's like, oh, failed. That doesn't help. With debugging, you can see exactly what's happening and what was the last thing that occurred, and that may help you figure out where you might have gone wrong in your PowerShell script. You can see the last thing that just occurred there was it actually activated the custom action here that I want to run. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload the page, and let's see what happens. Interesting. Not bad, right? No custom master page here. This is the Seattle master with some CSS and some JavaScript. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's see what happens in a responsive experience. So if I keep going smaller, we can see that the top menu changed. So now I've got a clickable event just using a little JavaScript injection. Something else you can maybe see to like the two columns here. When I get smaller, the two columns collapse. Now the way that happened, I mean, there's a couple things going on. I told you that there were two primary functions that were be loaded. There was a mobile UI component. That was what is providing us the functionality of our drop-down menu. The other thing was the wiki layout. And if we go ahead and we look at the CSS and whatnot, the HTML structure, what we're going to find is, there we go, it's this right here. The JavaScript function that was triggered is basically looking for the wiki layout. It's looking for this wiki content here. It's looking for this, this wiki content class. And if it does, it goes down to the different rows and it adds in some extra classes here. So you can see I have this PM layout table row, and I even looked at saying a column number. So using a little bit of JavaScript, I was able to manipulate the DOM just a little bit. So now I can have CSS that can provide me styling, in particular maybe some mobile styling. There's ways to do some of this in Java, just in straight CSS, but I found it to be sometimes a little hokey. I have found that injecting just a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of custom classes makes my styling that much more robust and allows me to do things like inline scrolling, so my overflow doesn't cause a problem. All right. So that's kind of a lot going on there. I know that there's a lot more we can do, but I'm going to have to keep pushing forward in interest of time. So custom master pages and page layouts would be the next level of effort that we can jump into. Now these are based on ASP.NET, server-side rendering, i.e. old school, like 2004, 2005 is when this stuff came out. It's old. It's being replaced by the SharePoint Framework. Microsoft is very well aware that master pages were great when they came out, but now they're old technology. We need something new. With classic experiences, though, they do provide complete control of the UI. Which is great. You can do anything you want with the DOM. If you dream it, it really should be possible. Maybe you might not want to do it in SharePoint, but you could. But this is old technology. It's not future friendly. Any update could break it, depending upon what you're doing, and definitely no modern UI support. And this is not expected at all, period. Microsoft has made it very clear that they are moving on from the master page experience, and SharePoint Framework is the way to go. If we want to look at kind of some more stuff, I kind of keep talking about the different experiences that are out there, especially the modern experiences. Really, that's to me that it's not just the modern UI for the lists and libraries, but it's the modern team sites. This is again very just for Office 365. When you create a group right now, a group automatically gets a classic team site. Microsoft said, and I heard it from Vesa Jovanen again during one of the PMP community calls, so it was public domain, so I hope that I'm not giving anything away. Microsoft is considering allowing us to create groups that have classic team site, that uses a classic team site template, so we would get back a lot of our customization until they get feature parity. But basically, with modern team sites, all we have is that minimal theming that I showed. Long-term solution most likely is the SharePoint Framework, but as of right now, I haven't seen anything to say that it's on the roadmap, but like there's no bits yet ready. The SharePoint Framework is currently only for web parts, which provides some customization, but not quite. I'm going to reiterate, though, that classic team sites and master pages, according to Microsoft, will be available until we see feature parity with the modern experiences. So I want to go back now to the custom master pages. Let's go ahead and do a quick demo on what you could do with a custom master page. So I'm going to move on to demo 3. The first thing I want to do is I want to deactivate my custom branding. That way we can make sure that everything is still good. Okay, so let me go ahead and re-verify that the site is back to normal. Excellent, it is. I need to quickly run, yes, okay, that's running. So now what I want to do is find my code. I need to switch to a new folder where I have my master page stuff. Okay, so next thing, and while this is running, I'll show you kind of what we're doing here. I'm running a new PowerShell script. I'm deploying to the same site. I'm sending my credentials, and this time I am serving local. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about what's happening. Okay, while that's going on, let's go look at our code. Let's go look at what we're doing here. Okay, so this time we are sending a new master page. So it is a new master page. Now, why am I doing this? Basically, I find the master page, you might want to do it if you're going to be doing some heavy DOM manipulation. So if you really want to tweak this HTML structure, and there's one line I really want to look at here, if I can. In particular, I'm tweaking say I want to really tweak the top navigation, or maybe I want to really move things around. I may want to go ahead and create a custom master page. If you're creating a custom public-facing site on SharePoint on-prem, I can see the value of a custom master page. If you're building a portal experience, an intranet-extranet portal, what I have found most current developers, modern developers doing, and definitely this is what we've been doing for a while, is we leave Seattle Master alone. We use JavaScript to parse the data that we want, and then we use JavaScript, Vanilla.js, jQuery, Angular, React, etc., to basically recreate the UI on top of SharePoint, so we don't actually have to customize the master page. Anyhow, I am uploading a custom master page. We'll see why in a little bit. I've got a bunch of files that I'm uploading, some new JavaScript, etc. A lot of the CSS and JavaScript from level 2. The first one I'm actually leaving alone, and I'm pushing out there. Okay, let's see what we're done. So it looks like it says we're completed successfully. Let's go ahead and reload. There we go. So very similar experience, but you can see I have sort of some new headers at the top. Maybe this would have been easier to have provided by manipulating the HTML structure in the master page alone. And maybe I wanted to add a footer, and I wanted a more complex footer. Reasonable reasons why you may want to customize the master page, but you definitely can do it. It does work, and Microsoft is committed to supporting it. They understand the scenarios exist. They're not going to take them away from us, so we don't need to worry about it. All right, let's keep going forward. So what tools are available to us then if you want to continue to brand SharePoint? Well, so for classic branding, anything that you're doing on your classic experiences, you still have SharePoint Designer. SharePoint Designer 2013 is the last version of SharePoint Designer. Microsoft has made it reasonably clear that they are not going to be updating SharePoint Designer at all, nor are they providing us any new SharePoint Designer-like tool directly for SharePoint. But it's still there. It still works. It still works on SharePoint Online just fine. Visual Studio is still available as well for building your full trust solutions, for building your sandbox solutions, for building your add-ons, etc. So you can definitely use those. And then, of course, you're going to have your browser developer toolbar. This is my go-to tool for anytime I'm trying to work with any kind of UI updates on SharePoint. I'm going to be using that developer toolbar. Okay, but if you're moving forward, it's time to update your tool set to what the pros are using. In particular, if you're doing CSS and JavaScript modifications, if you're going to be working with the SharePoint Framework, and even if you're just going to be working with alternative CSS and JavaScript, it's time to grow up and use the new modern tools. Hopefully a lot of you have already been using these tools or have heard of them, but you want to go there. What does that include? That includes tools such as Node.js, which is the base structure you're going to use. It's the base framework that you're going to use anytime you're trying to build and compile your code, as well as debug, lint it, as well as serve local and make it so that you can debug SharePoint quicker. You've got tools such as Yeoman, which are your replacement for project templates in Visual Studio. You've got things like Gulp, which are task runners. TypeScript is a new language. It's not necessarily new. It's a superset of JavaScript, open source, that Microsoft created. You should be looking at new front-end frameworks that are JavaScript-based, such as React, or maybe you're already using something like Angular or something else. Instead of using SharePoint Designer, it's time to use a tool such as VS Code. That's a free open source text editor that SharePoint provides. That's what I've been using when you've been seeing my code in the previous 3 demos, as well as looking to use PowerShell for deployment. Even if you're not a heavy developer and you're going to be just providing UI interfaces on top of SharePoint, you want to learn these tool chains. And don't worry, I've got a really good link, 2 links I think actually in my references, getting you started with the SharePoint Framework. And if you get started with the SharePoint Framework, all of these tools will be taught to you. They'll tell you where to get them and how to use them. There's lots of good demos as well as videos and articles written out there on how to use these tools to help make SharePoint better, make it look better. Oops. There we go. So if you've got your branding, you've got the updates that you've been making, and you've got the tool set you're using to now make the branding, now you need to, of course, install it and maintain it. We've shown a bunch of different ways to do it, but let's sort of look at them all at once. We've got SharePoint Designer we can still use. It's a by-hand methodology to deploy into SharePoint. The benefits of it are that it's simple, and it is. It's a go-to first tool. I mean, even if you're updating SharePoint Online, it's really easy to open up SharePoint Designer and to mess with your changes there. You don't have to deploy anything. You just open it up. You can make your changes. You can see what it looks like. You can see your SharePoint structure in a tree view, and it works. Major issues is that this is not redeployable, right? This is a one-time, one-off thing. So if you're trying to build a solution that is easy to push between your development, UAT, and production environments, SharePoint Designer is at best a initial development tool. You can use the feature framework that will build your Visual Studio-based solutions, your WSPs. This is a very repeatable practice. You can deploy it to the farm, which is really nice on-prem, because if you've got a organizational branding template for collaboration, let's say, and you're the type where you create a site collection or per team site, you may have 20,000 site collections. Using the feature framework that has something like feature stapling, this is the automation available in features, you can auto-deploy all of your branding anytime a site collection, a web app is even deployed. That's pretty powerful. I mean, I admit that's really cool, but it's not cloud-friendly, so you only can use it on-prem. And when you make updates, it can be pretty heavy-handed. It can be pretty tough, depending upon how you build your feature. It may not auto-deploy your updates to, say, your 20,000 webs or site collections or web apps. So it can be difficult. Microsoft is definitely pushing us away from the feature framework. They really don't want us going that way because of the limitations it has. They want us to move into the add-in model, or they've really been pushing hard on the patterns and practices, or P&P, that I've been talking about. The add-in model, though, so it's still supported. It's still it's not been deprecated. Microsoft is still actively supporting it and maintaining it. The add-in model is cloud-friendly, and it does provide isolation, which is considered a good thing in many instances. But I have found the update process to be subpar, and it can be difficult to maintain. It's not really my preferred method, for sure, for deploying branding. And then lastly, the major deployment method, and I'm sure you can tell I'm pretty biased now, is using patterns and practices, which you can build applications, or you can use PowerShell to create cloud-ready versions of a deployable packaging, basically, where no Visual Studio is required, that you can deploy into SharePoint. This is repeatable. It's very simple to update. The P&P's deployment provisioning methodology looks for deltas. It looks for changes. So anytime you make a change to something, you could just rerun the script on top of an existing site, and only the changes will be deployed. So it's really nice. The issue here is, as of now, there is not a full automation story. So there's not a way to have feature stapling, say, directly in P&P so that something runs and it will automatically update. Now, there are ways to get around that, for sure. There are applications that you can build a console application, let's say, that acts as a proxy that's installed over in Azure, and using Azure functions, you can using other methodologies as well, you can trigger your console app basically over in Azure to execute when it gets some sort of notification. Webhooks is another technique that can be used. But this is not baked yet. It's definitely well in the oven, and it's looking good, and people have started taking that out of the oven and using it, but it's not fully there. My interpretation is that that's where Microsoft is taking us, and over the next months, quarters, I think a year's too long, we're going to have much more guidance coming out from Microsoft on this deployment methodology. So let's go ahead and let's do our final demo here, which is looking at the P&P PowerShell. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my code here, and I'm going to go back to the alternative CSS, and let's see what's going on here. Within the, sorry for all the clicking here. So I have a PowerShell script. I want to look at that, and then I want to look at some XML documents. So let's go ahead and let's look at this. What's happening in the script? This is a PowerShell script. The top of this is not very entertaining. The top of this is basically just PowerShell setting up some variables. What I really want to look at is right here in the middle. So let me go ahead and let's highlight this code, and then let's go ahead and let's look what's going on here. Using PnP PowerShell, and there's great documentation online on PowerShell. We'll get to that in a little bit here, my references. You can use PowerShell to run new commands available to us. There's about 200 current commands. One of the commands we can use is connect to SharePoint. Now it says PnP connect PnP Online. That actually works for on-prem as well. You give it a URL, and now the context of this session is connected to that site. So then I can go ahead and run another command, which is this apply PnP provisioning template. That's a PowerShell command that is given a bunch of parameters, one of which is a path to an XML document. We're going to go look at that XML document next. All right, so let me go ahead and let's look at what else we're doing here. Let me highlight some code that I find of interest. So it's going to be this code right here. So that provisioning provisioning commandlet will install applications. It will install files and whatnot. You can run other commands like set PnP web, which allows you to set things like the alternative CSS URL you want to use. It maybe allows you to set a logo. There's a whole bunch of different settings that the PnP web commandlet allows you to set. And then you can see at the end here, I'm actually setting another, I'm rerunning the apply provisioning template on a different file this time to install and provision even more assets. So you could run all of this by hand. You don't need to use a PowerShell script, but obviously using a PowerShell script creates a repeatable practice that allows you to execute effectively one command, and all of the scripting will get run for us. All right, so let's look at the XML documents here quickly. The provisioning scripts itself allows you to do things such as provision files. And you can see here I'm provisioning a bunch of files. I'm giving the file names that I want to grab from the local location. And then I'm able to select what folder within SharePoint I want them installed into. So extremely easy. There's no compiled code here. This is all just text files effectively that I'm writing to deploy files. The last file I want to show you here in this provisioning example is another provisioning template, which is installing our custom actions. So here in our custom actions, what we're able to say is we want to install a custom action as a script link, and then effectively we're creating a script block which loads our JavaScript, which loads the custom JavaScript that we want to load, which is happening right here. So using simple PnP and some commandlets, we're able to now provision directly into SharePoint with no code. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty powerful for a lot of people. Okay, so what about the framework? This should really be on everybody's radar. Everybody on this call should be thinking about this, even if you're on 2016. Pretty important stuff. As of now, the framework, the SharePoint framework, which did go GA last month, it is really not for branding, unfortunately. It is for creating custom web parts. It's a good start, and it seems pretty clear that the core of the framework is what will be our tool set for creating custom UIs in the future. But it does provide some customization in the sense in Modern UI, because we can add our own custom web parts. And if you're willing to break SharePoint and definitely go against Microsoft, you could actually inject your own custom JavaScript and CSS using the framework through very unsupported ways. I don't have a link to the to Michael's specific blog post, but it's Michael Svensson. He's Norwegian, so it's Mikkel, M-I-K-A-E-L. If you want to Google him at all, but he's definitely been pushing the limits of the SharePoint framework, and he's one of the pioneers for sure. But some common questions, you can kind of read them here, but it's around custom master pages. That's your custom master pages in the SharePoint framework are different technologies. They're not going to work. The framework is ready for prime time. I mean, it is. It's out. It's in GA. It's fully deployed into SharePoint Online. It is supposed to get into SharePoint 2016 this calendar year. It's what they say. I don't know. I really have no idea if that's going to happen or not. This will never be deployed on SharePoint 2013. Supported from Microsoft. You can do it, and there are people who have been doing it in labs, but it's not really supported in 2013. If you want to get started with the framework, I've provided you the 2 best links that I know of. This is some example web parts that have been created, as well as the official docs that Microsoft has produced. If you want to get those links, though, I suggest please do just download the slide deck, because I'm going to move on. All right, so let's kind of look over an overview with kind of costs. We've got Office 365 themes. They're extremely simple, and they're really cheap. It's simple, quick. You saw it, 5 minutes, you're done. Office 365 theming and compose looks, they provide you some customization. They're very simple to create. You should not need a developer to do it. It's something most anyone on this call should really be able to do with just a little bit of effort. Alternative CSS provides you more functionality, a little more customizations, as long as you're not trying to touch the modern UI. It does cost more, though. I mean, it's more time intensive for sure. JavaScript Inject is actually really similar to me to alternate CSS, except that it takes more of a coder. You saw, I hope you saw, that I was able to create some pretty sophisticated customizations on the UI, make the site look much less like SharePoint, make it mobile friendly without manipulating the master page using JavaScript Embed and alternate CSS. And then finally, the custom master page. As of now, the available options as of today is the last one's your custom master page, which is fully unlimited. You really can do whatever you want. You maybe shouldn't, but you could. But it's definitely the most expensive, short-term to create it, long-term maintenance as well. So this story hasn't changed, unfortunately, too much. I'm sure a lot of you are like, yeah, we knew this a year or so ago. I get it. I'm just trying to reiterate as well what's available, and I'm trying to help push you towards the framework and towards PNP. So a quick review. Before we end this, we looked at the evolution of branding of SharePoint and then the current options available to us. That being the 365 themes on through custom master pages, as well as kind of a hint at the modern UI. We looked at the branding tools available to us. SharePoint Designer hopefully is making it out of your your toolbox, and what's going to be moved into that is more using VS Code, as well as Node.js and the modern tool chain that's available to us, or really being introduced to most of us through the SharePoint framework. And then lastly, I wanted to look at, or what we looked at was the development, the deployment and the maintenance methodologies. What I'm hoping you get out of this is you're going to be moving away from the feature framework and doing things by quote hand, and instead moving into a PNP console app, PNP PowerShell methodology. So with that, what I want to do is kind of get you the resources so we can see what's here. And again, you'll just need to get these resources directly from the slide deck. But what I want to point out here is the Customizing Modern Team Sites link at the top. That's an article that Vesa Jovanen just wrote that talks about how we can customize modern team sites. Basically, it's what we talked about, but it's still something I think you should look at. Also, at the bottom is the patterns and practices. So if you want to learn more about PNP and what I've been talking about, that is your starting place, is PNP. You know, why don't we, I've got a minute. I'm going to quickly go there because I think that's pretty important. You're going to go to github.com/SharePoint/PNP. What you get out of this, because this can be intimidating at first, is if you scroll down, you're going to get a whole bunch of links here. And if you want to learn about the provisioning schema, that's the way that I was provisioning. You're going to look at the provisioning schema link here. The other one you're going to look at is this PNP PowerShell. So if we go ahead and click on PNP PowerShell, I need to go to the code. And once I'm in code, I can go to the scroll down here, and there is the commands. Here we go. Navigate here for a list of all the commandlets and the parameters. Here's how you're really going to learn how to use SharePoint. So like if I wanted to go find the provisioning, I could go search for provisioning and find all of the provisioning commandlets available to us. And here is the apply PNP provisioning template. That's where I learned how to use this command. And within the documentation on GitHub, there is a whole bunch of stuff describing how to use the command, as well as, this is what I love at the bottom, they give you examples. It's just amazing stuff, all open source, all free. You have no excuse on getting started. Okay. I've got two last links. You just saw this, but this was the overall. If you want to learn more about PNP, you can learn all about it. And then lastly, I do want to point out that I am going to be going to SP TechCon Austin 2 weeks from now. I am giving 2 sessions. One of them is very similar to this on branding SharePoint best practices on Tuesday the 4th, as well as we're going to have some fun building our own light rate responsive framework on Wednesday. If you're going to go or you're looking to go, if you use discount code Overfield, you can save $200. So that would be really cool. So really with that, I want to, whoops, didn't fully mean to do that. I want to thank everyone for their time. It's now noon Pacific, so if you need to go, I totally understand. But if we have questions, I would be very excited to do my best to answer them.
We do have some questions, Eric, and
All right.
Great session. Wow, what a great time we've had today. So we do have some questions here. I'm going to start with some questions from our good friend Dave over at Indigo Slate. He's got to run very shortly, so I'm just going to do a couple of his questions.
Sure.
He asked, for the PNP command, let's see here, for the PNP command, is the source code available? Or are they open source?
Yes. So let me go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't read the full question. I'm sorry. For the PNP commandlets Microsoft provided, is the source code available? That's the full question.
Yes. So PNP is completely open source, which is pretty cool. So if you actually wanted to figure out how they did it, you can go into PNP and learn how to put all this together. What I did want to say though is if you want to get to my code, if you go to github.com/eoverfield, go to repositories, you can get my PNP demos as well as my Ignite team site branding demos. So these are really where you're going to find all of the code that I just showed. So this is very similar to what I presented at Ignite, but you can get all of the theming, the custom CSS, the JavaScript that I just showed. So if we kind of keep drilling down here, you'll see the PowerShell scripts that I updated.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, a question from Tim Bartlett. Is there an MVA course or other source you recommend for getting started with PNP?
Not that I know of. And what I recommend for getting started with PNP is, if I can find this, there is, I really like that question, the YouTube. So what you would do is let's do the AKMS PNP videos. The way I do this, if I can do this right, is YouTube. See, I do it all the time. PNP SharePoint channel. That's it. I misspelled channel. So if you PNP SharePoint channel, the PNP provides a whole channel. So in my opinion, why would you really pay for a course? It's all free. It's all available. So you can get started here. We've got the popular demos and whatnot, as well as, and I really didn't talk about this too much, there are monthly community calls as well as bi-weekly calls on some of their special interest groups. So to me, this is the place. You're going to learn so much here. Maybe a little overwhelmed. And to me, everything I've talked about in the last hour, you can probably get from this channel alone. The thing is, I tried to help distill it down to an hour's worth of starting. From there, you can start to really drill into these videos and learn a lot more.
Awesome. Kind of going along with that, Tim also asks, is there a Slack group for SharePoint PNP?
No, there is. So let's go back to GitHub. SharePoint PNP, there is a tech community. So they are on the tech community. That's really the place to get started. Yeah, no. I was thinking Microsoft Teams, but Teams right now doesn't allow for external users. So no, it's the tech community. The best place I have found to really talk about things is actually directly in PNP itself. If you have issues, the issues link is actively monitored and worked on, so it's a great place where a lot of conversations happen, normally around issues, though.
Great. All right, we've got a question from Kyle Mintz. He says, where can the deck be found?
Yes, I should probably go ahead and reload that. So let me go ahead and cancel out. Let's go all the way to the top, and let's leave that there.
There you go.
So I will go ahead and I will leave this slide up so we all can see it. But pixelate pxml.ly/eo-branding-options. Capitalization is important here, so I'll leave this up.
There you go. We'll also be blasting that out whenever we post the video for this as well. Another question from someone whose name I'm going to pronounce horribly, so I apologize. It was Hussein Tayebi. Eric, do you teach branding class?
Not paid. I do it definitely at conferences. Through PixelMill, I mean, I do provide, we provide branding assistance as well as we can do like paid one-off training. But really the best way to get a hold of that is to talk to, you can actually just email me. I do have a YouTube channel as well. If you just, I think if you type in Google, YouTube, Eric Overfield, you'll find my channel. I just don't remember the URL offhand, where I have a lot of these videos up, but I don't, PixelMill is providing more custom solutions around SharePoint, and that's where we focus our time rather than being a training company. I like doing these webinars because they're fun. I want to see cool SharePoint. I don't care if you use us. I don't care if you do it internally. I just want to see SharePoint adopted. Funny anecdote that I just saw off of Stack Overflow, I think it was, and I just tweeted this out. I just saw it this morning. They surveyed a bunch of developers, and they asked what is the most despised platform, and SharePoint won with 70.9%. It just beat out Salesforce as the most despised platform, and I get it, but I'm also disappointed. I mean, I do like the platform. I get it that it's frustrating, but at the same time, it is very powerful. And if you look at 365, there are really good tools there. There really are. I mean, they've done better than I think anyone else really has as the overall tools, and I want to see people adopt it. I do believe the interface needs help to raise adoption, and that's why I think that we need more of these sessions to help you get started.
All right, there you go. A question from Eduardo Osario. What about gulp tasks for development environment? Do you have a command on that? Or sorry, do you have a comment on that?
That's a whole session in and of itself. I don't know exactly how to answer the question. I can tell you that what I do, we used to use Grunt. We did move to Gulp. I will admit the primary reason why we went to Gulp was because the framework did. For those of you who are kind of like, well, what's he talking about? What is this whole Gulp thing? What Gulp is, and I'm running it here, Gulp is a task runner, and basically a task runner is, and what we can see here is it's running tasks for me. The tasks that I'm having it run here are to lint out scripts, so my JavaScript, it's verifying quality of my JavaScript. It's also combining the JavaScript together into one file, so it allows me to create 30 JavaScript files that get combined into one. It also allows me to use Sass and to compile my Sass, as well as I have another task which is a serve task, which is to basically build a local web server so I can tell SharePoint to load assets directly from my computer during development. So I don't know if you can follow up with the question while I'm talking about Gulp. That may help, because I don't know what you're asking about with tasks. I use tasks heavily, so I can create different tasks like Gulp serve, Gulp scripts, Gulp styles, etc. So I can have Gulp run one or more tasks at once. I don't know. I don't know if I'm missing the question. Michael, why don't we run on to another question if there is one, and if we get any more feedback, I'm happy to do my best to try to clarify my answer.
Sure. We've actually, that was the extent of the questions we had so far.
Okay.
I did encourage everyone to keep asking questions in the chat area. I guess any additional thoughts on branding that you'd like to share that maybe you didn't put into this presentation, Eric?
No, I don't. Nothing offhand. Let me try it. Okay, what about the Gulp tasks for development environment? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that any better than that. In the development environment, when I could tell you what I was doing was for the third demo that I showed with the custom master page, I wanted to load up JavaScript and CSS from my local computer. That way I don't have to keep publishing files into SharePoint. I basically can tell the master page to point back to me. And I created these gulp tasks which allowed me to compile all my files and then run that local host. And I don't know if I still don't feel like I'm answering the question that you're asking, but I hope that, Eduardo, I hope that was able to help somewhat. I can say for sure that when I'm developing in SharePoint, my whole company, when any developer's working on it, we are always serving our branding assets, JavaScript, CSS, locally during development. What it allows us to do is have multiple people building the same SharePoint site at one time, and we can work on our own piece of it, and we're not overwriting everybody's work during development. I could be building my own CSS and JavaScript that won't hurt anyone else during the development cycle. Then when we're ready, we use Git. We're able to commit our changes back into the primary repo, and they all get merged together for us. And that works extremely well, but that's a whole other session in and of itself on how to develop modern development methodologies.
I think somewhere in there you answered the question. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. Thank you, Eric, for another great session. We'll have information out soon about our next session, so keep an eye out for that. Eric, any final thoughts before we close this out?
No, I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. I look forward to our next webinar. And if I don't see you in Austin or SharePoint Fest DC or SharePoint Saturday Vancouver, ping me, find me, come say hi, say, yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.